I'm now going to ask the chair of our board, Gina Greene, to come, and she's going to describe a new initiative we're trying to bring whistleblower protections to stop the extinction crises. And believe me, the struggles we have here in the United States, they also have them where the poaching and the extinctions begin. Gina.
Good afternoon. Thank you. And I am super honored to be the co-chair of the National Whistleblower Center. And I first want to say I tremendously admire and respect all you whistleblowers. I just want to give you guys are totally amazing and brave. Now, I've spent most of my life protecting, I'm a scientist and an environmentalist. I've been protecting the world's natural resources. I mostly work in the tropics, in developing countries on wildlife protection and management, as well as protecting the management of the oceans. Now we know that the world is under increasing threat from organized crime. Let alone the 500 billion wild-caught fish industry suffers from rampant, illegal, and unregulated and unreported fishing. The forests are being decimated for lumber, and endangered species are being trafficked into extinction for medicinal, jewelry, and clothing consumption. It's a real problem. I know and I've witnessed that whistleblowers have been incredibly effective in combating other types of crime. Thank you. You guys have set the trend. You have set a model. However, it is time we bring the power of whistleblowers into the wildlife and environmental sphere. Wildlife crimes often originate outside of the U.S. This is an international problem and needs an international solution. Informants and whistleblowers outside the U.S., especially in developing countries where the rule of law is problematic, deal with tremendous hardships. And the U.S. should make every possible effort to incentivize them to come forward to law enforcement authorities and to ensure their confidentiality and safety. We need to take whistleblowing outside the U.S. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing our wildlife speakers. I'm going to introduce two in a row and ask that Dan Ashe, he is the former director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and now serves as the president and chief executive officer of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which represents more than 230 facilities in the U.S. and outside, internationally. He represents and oversees over 186 million annual visitors. Ashe, and we have the pleasure, he was previously the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where he worked to protect endangered species, restore wildlife habitats, and enforce federal wildlife laws. So I welcome Dan, but before Dan, hold on, we have another very special guest, and her name is Beth Allgood, who is the United States Country Director for the International Fund of Animal Welfare. And Beth assures the strategic development and implementation of U.S. projects and campaigns, with special emphasis on the U.S. role in ivory trade, wildlife trafficking, and wildlife security issues. Beth oversaw the strategic development and implementation of IFAO's U.S. campaigns to protect whales from threats, address global wildlife crime, and protect elephants. So I first welcome Dan, and then Beth will proceed, and we have a new subject, a new area where we would like to bring whistleblowing to. So thank you. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Steve, distinguished guest, and Beth. It's always good to share a podium and an occasion with the International Fund for Animal Welfare. I want you to put an image in your head of elephant, rhinoceros, tiger, grizzly bear. If you know what a pangolin looks like, imagine a pangolin. If you don't know what a pangolin looks like, it's a small mammal. It's kind of a cross between an armadillo and an anteater. It's the most trafficked mammal on the face of the planet. Wildlife trafficking is one of the big four trafficking crimes in drugs, in arms, in humans. It's having a devastating impact on wildlife and on communities, people, indigenous people, people who are dependent upon wildlife for subsistence. It's a threat to our world heritage as we see these wildlife populations diminishing before our eyes. And the problem is us, 7.5 billion people who share the planet today. And by the middle of the century, that will be 10 billion people. And it's not just the number of people, it's the affluence of people as we lift people from poverty worldwide. Wildlife trafficking is a crisis of the middle class and upper class as animals are traded as luxury commodities, animals and products from animals. It's a crime that's difficult to detect. We're very good at catching poachers, but we're not so good at catching the people who are profiting from the poaching. And wildlife trafficking is a high profit and low risk endeavor. As the director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I was proud of our law enforcement professionals who helped us begin to turn the tide and take the battle to the people who are making the profits. Operation Crash was the most successful undercover wildlife investigation in history. It's called Operation Crash because a group of rhinoceros is called a crash. And we decided to let the poachers go and let product move and try to catch the people who are profiting from the crime, and it was successful beyond our imagination. We crushed ivory twice in Denver, Colorado, and in Times Square to raise the profile of this issue to a worldwide audience. We banned the sale of ivory here in the United States, and we challenged China to do the same, and they have. We've recently seen ivory bans in the UK, soon hopefully in the EU. That was impossible without U.S. leadership. At the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, our 230 members are engaging in this issue. The modern zoological institution is a purposeful institution. They are powerful because they represent a collective opportunity. They invest more than $220 million a year in direct support for field conservation. They have more than 200 million annual visitors. And we have recently joined forces with the U.S. Wildlife Trafficking Alliance, the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance now being a program of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So we're joining with 50 NGOs and corporate partners to bring voice to this issue worldwide. An expression of that voice during the last Congress was the End Wildlife Trafficking Act. And one of the most amazing things about it is unusual thing in the world today, which is a bipartisan act of concern. Republicans and Democrats coming together to say we need to end wildlife trafficking. And yesterday was International Tiger Day. And on International Tiger Day, we joined forces with the World Wildlife Fund and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums to bring force to the issue of tiger farming and the trafficking of tigers and tiger products. In the current Congress, the effort continues. We have H.R. 5697, the Wildlife Conservation and Trafficking Act of 1918. It gives us new tools to detect wildlife trafficking, to prosecute traffickers, making wildlife trafficking a predicate offense under the RICO and Travel Acts, allowing for funds from prosecution to be recovered and committed to conservation. So we have an opportunity to work with you and your community to bring force to this issue, to uncover wildlife trafficking at its roots, to empower people to report and protect them when they do report, to turn the tables on traffickers, make wildlife trafficking a low-profit, high-risk endeavor. We have the opportunity to save animals from extinction and save a future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. It is really inspirational, really inspirational. So I know many of you personally, and so I know you know this, but some of you may not, that in East Africa, poachers are slaughtering elephants faster than these elephants can reproduce. In fact, tens of thousands of elephants are cruelly killed each year to meet the insatiable demand for ivory. The people and communities that live the closest to them, in fact, are the ones that pay the highest price for this illegal activity. And this is just one example of the urgent need to protect animals from illegal killing and to protect the brave people who come forward with information on this wildlife crime before it happens. So my name is Beth Allgood. I'm the U.S. Director for IFA. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to join you today to talk about IFA's perspective on the connection between wildlife crime and whistleblower protections. IFA is a global nonprofit conservation and animal welfare organization that identifies and combats threats to animals across the globe. For nearly 50 years, our organization has provided a global leadership, innovation, and hands-on assistance to animals and to communities in need. And we envision a world where all animals are respected and protected, and we strive to achieve the delicate balance between human and animal coexistence. We recognize that our mission begins with understanding and empowering people and local communities, and because these communities often directly interact with threatened species, they possess invaluable field experience and wisdom. It's precisely this fundamental spirit of cooperation and collaboration in multiple communities around the world that's driven our success over 50 years, and our work wouldn't be possible without the essential component of trust. And that includes trust in the community and trust in the system. Especially where government corruption is ripe, this can be quite difficult. So when this is lacking, the trust in the system, we're reminded of the fundamental role that whistleblower laws play and the purpose that we're here today. So IFA's global role and half a century of experience has shown us firsthand that there's a very real safety risk, as you may know, for people on the ground inside these communities and inside the governments, for people who have urgent information to share. And these people understand the greater good of the environment and animal conservation and their moral imperative to act, regardless of their own circumstances. And there's no information more urgent than that held by a whistleblower, because that real-time information can literally mean life or death for these animals. and it's often the only key to stopping a crime such as poaching before it begins. So IFAW recognizes the need to protect these whistleblowers and to take further steps all the way through the chain, from the poaching to the smuggling of wildlife products, through ultimately to the markets where the demand happens. And this year, we were delighted to welcome National Whistleblower Center Executive Director Cohn to a U.S. Department of State-funded cross-border wildlife security training on the Kenya-Tanzania border. The training focused on a range of countermeasures to wildlife trafficking, and the module on applying whistleblower laws to assist wildlife authorities, customs personnel, and local policymakers was particularly innovative. We're also pleased to announce that IFAW and NWC signed a strategic cooperative agreement last month to combat wildlife trafficking around the world, especially where the threat of corruption is most acute. This is just the beginning. Through these efforts, IFAW and NWC will continue to disrupt the wildlife crime supply chain. As long as the demand for illegal wildlife continues to keep the illicit trade alive, we'll need innovation, collaboration, and mutual trust to resolve the problem. The integration of whistleblower laws has proven effective in combating other forms of crime, as Dan mentioned. And at IFAW, we believe the time is ripe to integrate these protections fully into the wildlife crime sphere. And we support congressional efforts to more fully bring whistleblower laws into the field of wildlife trafficking enforcement. It's no surprise that monetary rewards are a motivator, but in our line of work, the promise of confidentiality is just as great. It can mean the safety and well-being of the whistleblower themselves, in addition to the animals we all want to protect. I just want to conclude my remarks with a reminder that animals and the environment are truly a fundamental component of our well-being, and that the value we place on them cannot be effectively quantified or in any way overstated. The need for stewardship of our resources begins at the individual level and connects us with the global community. It's when we join together, when we build that element of trust and give the brave and caring individual a chance to safely act for the benefit of the greater good, that we can achieve a sustainable and peaceful coexistence with the natural world. I thank the National Whistleblower Center for inviting me, and really for all of you, for all that you do. Thank you.